Hello and welcome to the Non-Perfect Parents Club podcast. I'm Emma, a mama of 2 girls, an ex-nursery practitioner and the creator of the Non-Perfect Parents Club. The Non-Perfect Parents Club is all about support, honesty, truths, acknowledging that none of us can be perfect parents because it's impossible, and basically just speaking the unspoken. The only rule here is no judgment allowed. I love hearing people's stories. I love finding out about other parents, their family dynamics, their values and how they tick. So that is what this podcast is going to be. Some great honest conversations about parenting, hopefully delving into some nitty-gritty thoughts and feelings that will make us all laugh, cry and sigh a big sigh of relief. Hello and welcome back to the Non-Perfect Parents Club podcast. Today I'm joined by Dan, our first dad on here. Hello Dan, welcome.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. We might as well get straight into the questions. So the first one is, and I've added a little bit on, so if you want to introduce yourself.
Of course.
And then tell us a little bit about your family dynamic and any heritage that you want to talk about.
Okay, so I'm Dan Knowles. I'm just turned 40, married, I've got 2 boys. I'm self-employed. My wife works with me in my business. We live in Heysham. Boys are 8 and 10. And what's our family dynamic like? It was quite interesting, I think, which is why I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
So, first of all, in terms of like my own personal heritage, my background, very sort of 2.4 children, nuclear family, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. It was, really standard. Mum and dad were in the sort of early 20s when they had me and my sister. Really kind of, great upbringing, really well looked after. Obviously not, we weren't rich or anything like that. We just kind of working class family and had great parents who did everything they could for us. Which I think is really important. I'm sure we'll discuss that a little bit more as we go through. Yep. And then for us, for my wife and I, so we have our own boy who is 10. He was born in 2012, and he's, wonderful little guy. He's, 50% me, 50% my wife in every way. He looks a little bit like me, looks a little bit like her. He behaves. He's got my confidence, but he's got her temperament, and he's quite chilled sometimes, and so that's really nice. And then I guess the sort of difference with our family is that our younger boy, who is 8, James, is he's asked through something called special guardianship. So that's quite a complex situation in that special guardianship is effectively adoption within the family. Yeah. And so he, by birth, we are his auntie and uncle. Okay. So he's his cousin. But he has been living with us now since he was 3, so he's been with us for 5 years. Yeah. So that's quite a different sort of family structure, I guess. Yeah. And interestingly, I mean, it's my wife's half sister. Okay. It's her son, and my wife herself had, I wouldn't say a difficult upbringing. My wife got a wonderful mother and a wonderful stepfather who's been in her life since she was very young. Her own father left when she was young. Right. And he was from Newcastle. And she's had a great life, great upbringing with her parents. Yeah. But her father was kind of moved back to Newcastle, and I guess that family situation was quite a bit different. Yeah. He had more family when he went back to Newcastle. Yeah. One daughter in particular, who has had challenges. Yeah. And part of the result of that was she had James very young. Right. With a really unstable situation. Yeah. And he ended up unfortunately in care. Right. Okay. And then we were at the point where social services were asking whether he wanted to, whether he should be adopted. Right. The sort of final resolution was they asked her his mum, his birth mum, if there was anybody in her family who would take him, and so we stepped forward and took him. Yeah, so
cool.
Yeah,
Gosh.
Yeah.
So
it's quite different.
What obviously must have been a big decision making process in that. So can you tell us anything about that? Was it a hard decision? Was it, we'll do it straight out, and kind of thought about the other bits afterwards, or what?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one actually. People sort of say it was because of the way the process worked. It was literally like a turnaround time of about 12 weeks.
Oh really? Wow.
Yeah. So when a child goes into care, obviously the priority is always repatriation back to the mother, back to the family.
Yeah.
But what happened is that happened a couple of times already.
Right.
And social services were getting to the end of their sort of tether, for want of a better word. They were kind of getting to a point where it was becoming impossible to repatriate him.
Okay. And
the same sort of patterns of behaviour kept emerging.
Yeah.
And I want to stress, it wasn't his mum. It was really because of his father,
right?
Who had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So it was a very quick turnaround period, and we were asked. We kind of knew. My wife and his half sister have had a not a close relationship, but they've had a relationship. Yeah. They talked, and we kind of knew something was coming.
Right.
And because one of the critical things was domestic violence. Okay. There was quite a lot of domestic violence.
Right.
Which was never he was never part of that.
Yeah.
But he was close enough to it for it to be a risk. And so we were aware of that, and so one of the kind of deciding factors for social services, because there was another sister that actually offered to take James as well, but it was deemed better to come with us, partly because there was distance between us. It wasn't easy for Dad to get in touch with Son then. Okay. So people often say, "Oh gosh, wow, that's such a brave thing to do, and it's a great thing," but I would challenge anybody, to go and see a 3-year-old kid and not want to look after them. Yeah. The children, the little kids. Yeah. And we got there. We'd met James before as a baby and whatever you. And we got there. We met, but the first time we kind of saw him again as that was starting to come off. He was with foster parents. Yeah. And it broke my wife's heart. Yeah. That her own flesh and blood is with foster care. Yeah. And there was a risk that he would go somewhere, and obviously adoption is. So one of the key differences between adoption and special guardianship is, his mum still has parental right, although we have overriding responsibility. She does have parental rights still. Okay. She can still visit. She can still see him. And we just felt that was the right thing to do. Yeah. And so we did.
Wow. So does that? I know we're veering off a little bit here, but it is part of the first question. How does that? Does it affect your family dynamic at all?
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
Yeah, massively. Because, we always say that the most impressive person in all this throughout has always been our son. Right. Because he's, he had to give up 50% of everything. Yeah. And he's done that just incredibly, and we're obviously really proud of him for what he's done, and how he's taken it. And one of the biggest challenges is that one of the things that you perhaps might not kind of understand if you're a parent with your own kids, or perhaps you've got adopted kids, it might be different there as well. Is that when you bring a new child into the family, one of the things that we discovered is families have what we call an energy. Yeah. Every household's got its own energy. Yeah. And that's the kind of standard culture of that family. It's the sort of, it's how you do things. It's how you all talk to one another. Yeah. It's how the routines that you're into. When someone new comes into that, it disrupts the energy.
Yeah.
And their energy is different. So they've got to pick up your energy.
Yeah.
So he was, at 3, he was quite behind developmentally, poor diet, hadn't really had much socialising with kids, was quite overweight and, you know, and so he was quite lethargic.
Yeah.
We've always been a sort of, you know, get up and go, do stuff,
yeah.
you know, let's go for a walk, let's go into town, let's, you know.
Yeah.
And getting him into that routine was, it's hard, you know, it was difficult. And then subsequently, you know, since that, one of the other biggest challenges is that when it's your own kid and a new child, is that when you watch your own child do things, pretty much most of the time, you can see that is how mum would behave, or that is how dad would behave, and that just is come from birth.
Yeah.
It's different with a different, you know, a child with different parents.
Yeah.
You're having to. They've got different behaviours, different ways of doing things that come from their own parents, and so it's hard to kind of to sort of say no, that's not how you that's not how you do things. That's not how we do it.
Yeah.
So that's quite tough.
Yeah. Okay. So the main rule of the Non-Perfect Parents Club is no judgment allowed. Have you ever felt judged in your parenting, and can you tell us about it?
That was a really good question. No, I haven't, but because I'm quite chilled with things, I'm quite sort of confident of my own ability.
Yeah.
I tend to sort of, you know, I'm sure I probably have been.
Yeah.
But I just kind of
like not affected.
I've just not noticed. But one thing that I say all of the time, and I think is really challenging, is mums. I think you know, I really notice it for mothers, the amount of judgment that takes place, and it you know, hey, how do you change it? I mean, it's changing the course of history, I think.
Yeah.
But I always remember an incident, and this starts from, I think it starts from, it starts in before birth, but it certainly, you know, it really comes into under the microscope after birth. And where I always remember it first happening was with breastfeeding. And we really struggled to breastfeed.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, and I remember a friend at the time did. And I just remember the kind of pain I felt watching, you know, in hospital, trying to do it, the nurse who was coming around, the specialist, trying to help support it, and it just wouldn't latch on, it just wouldn't do it. And I remember the kind of, you know, I remember feeling it was a pressure point, you know, after going through birth and everything, and for my wife, I remember feeling, you know, it was just really difficult, and it made, you know, it to me. But I just remember a few weeks after he was born, maybe he was about 6 weeks old, going into a cafe. During the day, as you do, it was probably a Tuesday morning. We were both off, you know, I was obviously having a day off work. We'd gone for a cup of tea. We're there with our newborn, and there was another family kind of next to us, and, you know, they were sat and talking, and they were one of these families who kind of just had to come over and say, oh, we've got a new baby as well, and we kind of just wanted to keep to ourselves, but, you know, we're quite, oh, lovely, yeah. And then she started to go on about breastfeeding, and, you know, sat there and started to feed, and to talk about how brilliant it was, and how wonderful she was, and, you know, and there was just no sense of kind of thinking, that not everybody can. Yeah. And, you know, I just remember it being quite showy off it, and, you know, how wonderful a mom and all of this. And I've kind of noticed that then subsequently throughout my life, you know, that there are these, you know, there's mums in the playground at school have to be in every take the kids
skill run.
Yeah, and it's watching Motherland, isn't it?
It literally is.
It's that that mum who has to take the kids to all the clubs and he's dashing around. I super mum. And I've just kind of watched that from afar and always been very conscious of it. And mums, you've got to give each other a break. You've got to be a bit more sympathetic and empathetic sometimes because it's and I'm sure again we'll probably talk about this a bit more, but being a mum is far harder than being a dad.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you. So you said that, like, have you noticed, and do you think there's a difference between mums and dads in terms of judgment?
Oh, huge. Yeah, huge. And one of the things I was talking to a friend the other day. I think with dads, there's good dads and there's crap dads.
Yeah.
And good dads, and I know a lot of great dads, and we all sit, don't we? We all have our conversations about our mates' parenting and all stuff like that. I want to do that. But I always kind of remind my wife, generally, most of the people that, our friends, all of our friends, they're good parents and they're good dads, And I think one of the things that kind of help one of the kind of factors that kind of cuts through all the good dads is generally they're quite humble.
Yeah, yeah.
It's you don't like to talk your kids up. But every so often, I was with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking, and he's a humble dad, and he said, "I've got to tell you though, mate." I said, "What?" He said, I was watching one of my boys who's really good at football. He was saying, he said, and he scored this goal the other day. He said, and I just stood there, and I kind of had to turn around for everybody else, and I was like,
"Oh,
yeah." And he wasn't bragging.
No.
He was just saying, I was really. It was a really proud moment. And we've got it. Our eldest has just got into the grammar school, so we're just like, it's that moment where you're just like,
and that's it's okay to be proud of your kids, isn't it? Like
exactly.
You've got to be proud of your kids.
But then there are some parents that are just like, well, my kid's super. All
I think it's that thing with everything in parenting, isn't it? It's that balance, and there's a very thin line between.
Well, you don't want to, the thing is, you don't want to distort their reality of the world as well.
Yeah.
You don't want to, you don't want kids that are going to grow up to be like that, to not be humble and to not be gracious and to have an ego, because ultimately they're the things that will probably make life harder for them.
Yeah, totally.
So,
well, another thing I just want to touch on that you kind of talked about there is one thing just a point that I want to make really in terms of like dads. So when you're a mum, and I noticed this when I was pregnant, I can't remember which girl I was pregnant with, but as a mum, you are so focused on baby, but for dads, we as mums, or I definitely did, kind of forget that for the dads or partners, you're not just thinking about baby, you're thinking about mum as well. And in terms of like worrying and stuff, it's something that I think isn't maybe talked about a lot. That do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm not saying this very well, but for dads, they've not just got the worry of the baby, and as a mum you're so kind of consumed with baby and baby being alright that you forget about yourself, whereas dad's got both to think about.
Well, I think again, this is it's, I mean, what you're describing there is, again, for good dads, I would go back and say, there are some dads, unfortunately, that don't think about both.
Well, yeah.
In fact, don't think beyond themselves as well. But for good dads, they do. They're conscious of that. But again, they're conscious of they're conscious of the responsibility they have within the family.
Yeah.
And I think that's the critical thing is that, it's everyone plays their role. Everyone kind of does their thing within a family, and and in fact, it's up to families as well to kind of identify what it is too, because I think to a degree it's different. It's different to this is we're in a changing world where a lot of women want to don't want to feel like they're kind of look my husband does this for me, does that for me. They want they want to, and and some families it isn't like that.
Yeah.
Some families, mums do want to have that.
Yeah.
What the role where and the family's decided that dad goes out and works and does this and things like that. I guess you're right. I mean, yeah, a good father will be, try to be aware of all these things and make life comfortable for everyone. But yeah, it's natural. Yeah. It's natural.
Okay. So how do you feel about parenting? Good, bad? Has it changed you? Have you got any regrets? It's quite a complex question there. A few things to think about.
I don't think parenting's changed me.
Okay.
Again, I've sort of I think if you're a good parent, people sort of say, when you start being a parent, I actually think, and it's probably what I was referring to earlier, I think if you're going to be a parent, for most people, that journey of parenting starts when you're a kid.
That's a good point.
And I think you're always, it's kind of something that you're always aware that you. Yeah. I would say that I've always been paternal.
Yeah.
So when I was kind of like, when I was young, I played a lot of sport.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed helping like the younger kids, doing a bit of coaching and stuff like that. When I was, I always enjoyed that sort of mentoring thing. And I think for some people, you're conscious that. Part of your life is that you're destined to be a parent.
Yeah.
And so you sort of try to shape yourself.
Yeah.
And I think subconsciously that a lot of good parents feel like that.
Yeah.
They do those things so that when it comes to actually being a parent, it's almost like you've done all the groundwork.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So you get to a point where when you become a parent that you fairly naturally just kind of pick up these things. I don't know about you, but we not often, but here and there there were sometimes there were babies in the family. I always like looking at playing with the little kids when I was a teenager and stuff, and so you grow those kind of you take on them challenges when they're there, and you sort of and you get them. So and I think the other thing on that is that I was really lucky to have a mum and a dad that were great parents.
Yeah.
And so I had this two role models that I watched that, focused their lives on being really great parents for me and my sister. And so I never kind of took that for granted though.
Yeah.
I always sort of realised that how fortunate that was, how lucky it was that you got to be like that. And so I've always felt like, with Sonny and then with James, it's a blessing. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
So I don't have any specific regrets about parenting either. But sorry, I don't have any big regrets. Like any parent, there's always things that I kind of think.
Yeah.
I wish I'd have done
hindsight.
That. Yeah. Oh, I wish I hadn't have shouted. I wish I wish I'd have kept my cool.
Yeah.
But these are little incidents.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a huge bearing on my.
Part and parcel of being a parent, isn't it? If you didn't do that, I think. That's kind of, I guess, like reflection, isn't it? And
of course it is.
Yeah. Okay. So number 4. Is there anything in your life that has shaped how you parent that you're happy to talk about? Any situations, circumstances that have affected this?
Yeah. So I think this is where I would say about my parents, and the parenting that I had, and I think it's. So my own dad kind of his parents separated when he was quite young. I think that shaped his sort of attitudes to family life. He didn't want that to be his life.
Okay.
And my mum had a quite a complex sort of relationship. She lost her mum very young.
Right.
And so I don't know. I mean, my mum is just a wonderful person, and she's a wonderful mum. And I don't know if she because she didn't have the role model of her own mother as as she was starting to get older, if that sort of shaped how she was a mum. But she was such a good mum. I think in some ways maybe it was because she was putting so much effort in. So I think I was really lucky in that sense. And you know, as I say, we weren't, you know, we lived down the corner from here, we weren't like mega wealthy or anything like that, but we had all the things that you would look back on and think, oh God, that really made my childhood. You know, we lived in a nice area. You know, it was a, you know, we lived in a place where we could go out. You know, we went on holidays every year. You know, that was always a thing that my mum and dad always made sure they saved money to go away for a week. Just, you know, the four of us. We had nice Christmases as family, and we were kind of. It was good, you know. They took my sister and I to places. You know, I played football. They went watching me play football, and again, as I said, I never took that for granted. I was always aware of it, and you know, to some degree, my parents wouldn't let me take it for granted. They always reminded me of how lucky I was, and that there were kids out there that didn't have that, and it was, and I think that was right. You know, I think that's the right way of doing it, of kind of giving that your children that perspective. I think the one sort of, I do have one kind of abiding memory of what parenting meant to my parents. And when I was about 7, my dad, my dad's a bit of a socialist. So in fact he's a lot of a socialist. But so he valued education. He was a builder, a bricklayer, and it was always his thing that he didn't want his kids to kind of go down that route. So he really pushed education for me and my sister. We both went to university. And you know, and he put a lot into that. We were the first kids in the family to go to uni, and that was his thing. And I can remember, you know, he was so proud when we graduated. And, I remember as you know, when I was 7, we had to. It was 7 or 8, and it was really bad time in the country. But at the end of the sort of Thatcher government. John Major was in power, the Conservatives were collapsing, my dad was over and thrilled that they were. And he would talk about how education was always so important. He made us work so hard at school. And I remember him, he was a builder. So at that time, there wasn't a great deal of work for builders in the UK, so he had to go and work in Germany. So I remember being at home and it being really difficult for my mum. And my dad not really having a choice. He had to go because he had to earn money. He had to send it back to my mum for her home and everything. And I remember that period being really difficult, and I can't imagine it was easy for my dad. He would have never said. But I can't imagine it was easy for him. And that was a moment that really shaped kind of my attitude to sort of life and parenting in general. That, you know, you've got to do all these things so you don't have to go leaving your kids for a year to go and work abroad or whatever. So that's kind of what's, I guess, shaped my attitude.
Okay. What is your biggest value when it comes to parenting?
Well, it's 2.
Okay.
The first one is kids don't follow example. So kids don't follow instructions; they follow examples. So you know, you know, if you are shouty, screamy, you know, have angry outbursts regularly, don't be surprised when your kids do. It's gonna happen. You know, if you sit on your phone all the time, don't be surprised when your kids want to sit on the phone all the time. I think that's you know, this is a really important thing. You know, you as a parent, you know, you are the biggest. You're your kids' heroes. You know, you're the people that they want to be with. You know, more than anybody. So, you know, don't take that for granted, and make sure that it's always quality time, and you know, and talk to them and listen to them. You know, a friend of mine said the other day, he'd been reading a book about fatherhood, and he said, just keeping on the amount of times you give your kids instructions versus the amount of times you actually talk to them and listen to them. And you know, they're coming from school, right, put your bags down, right, go and do this, right, go and do that, and you know, they're like, can I tell you about what happened at school? And like, no, go and do this, go and do that. So I think that's the first one is they don't follow instructions, they follow your example. The other thing, and I think again, I go back to, maybe this is a little bit more for mums than dads, but there's something that I really noticed, that don't judge your parenting on isolated incidents.
That's a really good one.
You know, the only time you can judge parenting is in the future when you look back at how your kids have developed. You know, and I look at my kids and think, they're not bad.
Yeah.
They're pretty
Yeah.
good, you know. They're pretty nice kids. They're all right. They've got a good idea what right and wrong is. Yeah, all right. So one of them was in trouble because he nicked a few biscuits, you know, from school the other day. Or,
Yeah.
you know, he's just been a bit blippy, and
Yeah.
and I've shouted at him, but you can't judge your parenting on isolated incidents.
Yeah.
Don't take them to heart. Get over them. Move on.
Yeah. That's a really good one. What has been your biggest challenge so far?
Yeah, I mean, going through special guardianship's been
Yeah.
the biggest challenge. It's, you know, it certainly hasn't been a bed of roses. It's been really tough. It's been worth it, but it's been incredibly tough. I mean, it's been tough for a few. I think the first thing is kind of in hindsight, you know, the effect that it's had on our older son, and some, you know, how that's affected him.
Yeah.
It's something that, you know, we often reflect on, and you know, and you question yourself. You question, do you do the right thing?
Yeah.
Because, you know, not only that sort of giving up 50%, but also, I mean, they're like chalk and cheese. They're just completely different kids, and it creates a lot of tension, and you know, that's hard to deal with.
Yeah.
The other thing that's been really difficult has been, because what happens when you take on special guardianship, and it's the same with adoption, when you get to the point where you say, right, this is now a formal arrangement, your support, your infrastructure disappears immediately.
Right. Okay.
So you don't have any involvement with social services anymore. You don't have any of that support. You're left to fend for yourself.
Okay.
And we're incredibly lucky. I'm incredibly lucky that I've got a wife who is just I am going to get what I want here. And so she will kick off for everything. She will make sure that if there's something that we need for our son, she will go to task on it. So, for instance, the last 18 months we've been getting support from Bernardo's.
Okay.
For him to kind of deal with, you know, because obviously there's trauma, and he's got to deal with that, and it's, you know, it's difficult, and she has absolutely had to fight for that.
Right.
You know, she's had to really battle with schools, with doctors. You know, the amount of times that you're given a phone number and it's not the right person. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's bonkers. So we've really had to be tenacious and loud and shouty. And that's my advice to anyone who's kind of going through something like this with the kids. You know, whether it's trauma, whether it's, you know, whatever it is that your child is having troubles with, you know, don't pass it off. Don't accept that that's the answer, and you can't, you know, go for it, and just really, you know, get your headmasters involved in the school, get your GPs involved. Probably the biggest thing that we did is we kept a diary of everything for a long time. So special guardianship has been the biggest challenge.
And I just kind of want to touch on what you said there about like shouting for what you need, and I do really agree with that. Like, at the end of the day, we are the advocates for our children, and if we don't, you know, advocate for their needs and what they need, then who else is going to? And like we said before, you're their role model, and you've kind of got to show them as well that, you know, if there's something that you're struggling with, you ask for help.
Well, that's the thing, and I think the other thing on that is that one thing that we discovered is childhood trauma is really not understood well at all. Teachers don't understand it. And they're the first people that you think would. But if you go and speak to a teacher and ask them to tell you what they know about childhood trauma, they will not have a clue. And then in the next lesson, they'll stand there and they'll scream at a child. And that in itself will create trauma. It's one thing that I think we really don't understand as a society, that we need to get our heads in gear on. Because I walk around now, having gone through this journey with James, and I feel like now I can be in situations with adults, and I see something and I think, that's come from your childhood. That's something ingrained in you from childhood. and that's a trauma thing.
Yeah.
And we need to start learning about that quickly.
Yeah. Again, I massively agree with that. From some of the work and stuff that I've done, I know that a lot of issues that adults have as adults, a lot of it stems back to their childhood.
Absolutely.
And it's stuff that's not been dealt with, and that's kind of another reason behind why I do what I do and support parents, because it's the children that end up with the issues as the adults. And
absolutely,
yeah,
they're the parents tomorrow, so you've got to give them all the tools they need to be good at it.
Okay, so last question.
Yeah.
What do you wish you could change about parenting in general, as in for everyone, as every parent?
Okay. So there's 3 things
that
I'd like to see change. A couple of them are kind of policy, and one of them is just generally. Policy-wise, first of all, we need we desperately need a change in early years childcare policy.
Yeah.
We need access for all kids to get high quality, affordable childcare.
Affordable, yeah.
It's that simple. These are the and the quality is important as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Early years is critical.
Yeah.
Socializing children from a young age, giving them opportunity. I mean, one of the things that we knew, from James's background, he just didn't get any access to that.
Yeah.
His mum couldn't afford it. It was always like 2 bus rides away.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. So that's an imperative. That needs to change quickly. I think as well, one of the things that I've noticed is equality across access to IVF treatment. That's something that we've noticed. It's a postcode lottery.
Yeah.
And there's so many different rules wherever you go about it.
That just blows my mind.
And it's bonkers.
It is.
So it's something that I think again needs addressing.
Yeah.
And needs looking at to support those families that go through it. I think it's just bonkers.
I can't even comprehend how it can be like that. Do you know what I mean? It is just. I mean, we could go off on a whole other thing there, but it is just crazy.
It's so poorly, and it should be something that's prioritised.
Yeah.
And then I think the thing for me is, unfortunately, we do, and we've kind of touched on some things here, but we do still live in a very patriarchal society, and I would like to see more support, education for young men, teenage boys, into the importance of what being a good parent and being a good father looks like, what that means.
Yeah.
In certain communities, city areas like London, where there is a lot of kind of fatherless families, which kind of then becomes a bit of a sort of a recurring pattern then, that and when that happens, often you have instances of higher rates of crime and what have you. And I think there's, I'm fairly sure, and there's research around that, in situations where you do have, absent fathers, you've got issues around higher rates potentially of crime, what have you. That needs teaching. That needs, and that needs to, hopefully that's something that you mentioned, they're scared to talk about things. I think that's probably one of the things that we're scared to talk about, is actually, how can we help young men to become, better role models, better fathers in particular, and another thing is understanding the breadth of what it means to be to be a dad, because it isn't just about kind of just having a kid, and it's about, and again I go back to what I said before. Becoming a parent doesn't start when the child is born. It starts a long time before that. It means building a secure environment for a child to come into. It means putting the building bricks in place. It means having having somewhere to live, having a source of income, having the resilience that when your kid is born, because they're pretty expensive and they need things. So do you know what those things are going to be? Have you got access to them? How are you going to solve all these challenges when your kids come along? And actually, preparing young men to think about these things before actually going and doing it.
That's a really good point. And like you say, it is quite a patriarchal thing, I guess, because like a lot of the focus is on mothers and like we've touched on quite a few times, is your role modelling. Again, if you haven't got that role model of a father that's doing everything that needs to be done, then I think for a lot of people it's either a vicious cycle that repeats, or you get the odd few that break away from that and want to do it differently. So that's a really good point.
It is, and I think that it does. And taking on board the fact that there's parenting takes a lot. It takes a lot of responsibility. And I just remember reading one thing a few years ago. There's nothing sadder than a crap dad. There's nothing. Like a dad that doesn't see the kids. And sits and gets drunk or whatever. And as you get older, we all know these guys. And there's nothing that you look at and think, oh God, that is just a sorry state of affairs.
It is, and like we kind of said already, at the end of the day, it's the child that
affects,
exactly. That kind of goes with them then, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it's not. And the other thing as well about this, is guys have to become better at understanding. Have we got time for one more example?
Yeah, we've got.
Good, because this is. So one of the personal things that I've had on my journey recently, with my wife, and men need to be much better at understanding the role of mothers.
Yes.
And I mean, goodness me. I mean, I've had lots of conversations at work about this recently.
Yeah.
And, like guys generally, if you look after yourself, and I mean, I'm a big believer in like a holistic approach to life. Mental fitness is supported by your physical fitness, and looking after yourself generally helps. So if you're a guy and you'll keep on top, try and keep fit, play with your kids, eat well, don't drink too much, then hopefully that goes some way. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but it goes some way to supporting mental health.
Yeah.
Won't be everything, but it goes some way. Women naturally do not have that. Once a month, a woman goes through what I think must be the most horrific thing in the world, going through menstruation, and I kind of look at my wife and think, oh gosh, what a difficult thing that must be, and then everything that comes with it, so that's already difficult. So being a guy and understanding that your wife goes through that is really important. But I think then the other thing on top of that, we had this conversation a little while back, and I said, it's sort of we'd been in this bit of a cycle of arguing. Yeah. And I thought, it's just because I'm quite hands on.
Yeah.
She just doesn't see it, does she? Why don't you see how hands on I am?
Yeah.
And then it suddenly dawned on me. I am hands on, but I equate it to being a little bit like being at work. In a workplace, you've got an assistant. Say you're in a factory, the assistant kind of picks and packs or puts stuff on the machine.
Yeah.
The manager is the one who's worrying about everything.
Yeah.
Is the order getting out on time?
Yeah.
Are the customers happy? The assistant doesn't worry about that.
Yeah.
Just picks and packs and puts stuff away.
Yeah.
The manager's thinking, is the order going through? Where's the next customer coming from? Where's the driver over there? The picker over there. In the house, I'm the assistant.
Yeah.
My wife's the manager.
Yeah.
So I'll say things like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And she'll say, just figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'll say, no, but if you give me a list, I'll be fine. And then it dawned on me, not only is she writing my list, but she's writing my two boys' list.
Yeah.
And she never misses a birthday.
Yeah.
And she always knows when it's non-uniform day.
Yeah.
And she always knows when the school trips are coming up.
Yeah.
And if my jeans have got holes in them, she'll order me a new pair of jeans.
Yeah.
She runs like this incredible tight ship. And it suddenly dawned on me that the mental strain that must take, as well as trying to work, as well as trying to do the other things. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like an epiphany.
Yeah.
And it was a turning point really for us, you know, in terms of like how I viewed our relationship. And I think for me, you know, the more that guys kind of figure that out, I think the happier families.
Game changer.
It is.
Honestly.
It is. And it was really funny, you know, really interesting, because I always thought I was a good dad. But actually I suddenly realised I could have been so much better. And I think that's really important as well.
Yeah.
Good.
Wow. Okay, so that's all the questions. Anything else that you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty covered.
That was great chatting with you. That was really good.
Good.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow, review and share with other parents you know. I'm aiming to record weekly, and you can now listen on Apple, Spotify and Amazon. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please get in touch. Thank you, Dan, for joining me today's podcast. It's been great to have you, and thank you to everyone for listening.